Welcome, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you here today for our first webinar of GHAI's three-part school food webinar series. We hope to bring you the opportunity to learn more about the policy design of Brazil's School Meals Program, PNAE, its associated policies on nutritional requirements and connecting with family farmers, as well as recent efforts to ban ultra-processed products in school feeding environments. My name is Vanessa Rodrigues, and I am the GHAI Brazil in-country coordinator for the food policy program for the speakers, okay? So our amazing panelists for today are Georgia Castilho Russo. She's a nutritionist specialist in obesity and public food policies and a technical consultant at IDEC. She is the president of the Management Committee for Organic Foods and School Meals Law in São Paulo, and has experience as a National School Meals Program Manager. Georgia is a former member of several strategic spaces, such as the School Feeding Council, the Regional Council of Nutritionists, the Intersecretarial Committee for Food and Nutrition Security, and the Council for Food and Nutrition Security. Mariana Santarelli is a sociologist and the FPP project coordinator at FIAM Brazil. She is a council member of the National School for Food and Nutritional Security and a member of the executive core of the School Meals Watch. Carolina Rocha is a nutritionist, public health specialist, and is currently a health analyst at the Desiderata Institute. She is also a master's student in the area of food and nutrition and collective health, researching public and private sector policies and actions for the creation of healthy food environments. And Marília Sobral Albiero is a chemical engineer, and she's the leader for innovation and strategy and the food project coordinator at ACT Health Promotion. She's an advocacy and public policy specialist and has an MBA in international trade. She has experience in the area of innovation, market intelligence, and strategy, having worked as a social impact consultant for private companies. Our webinar today will be broken down into two parts, so the presentations and then discussion. So please remember to submit your questions to the panelists through the Q&A function, so they can answer in the portion of the panel. So let's start. Georgia, the floor is yours. Por favor, Georgia, pode começar. Thank you, everyone.
Please, Georgia, you may start.
Primeiro, eu queria agradecer muito a oportunidade.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity of talking about our experience in Brazil in relation to school food programs. I'm going to try and be nice and calm in my words, but if I speak too fast, please let me know. But it is easier for me to speak in Portuguese, okay? So next slide, please. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about the National School Meals Program structure in Brazil, okay? And the whole sort of pathway that we took in order to ensure that this program has the consistency that it has today. And I'm also going to explain some specific points of our structure, which is the division between private and public school in our tripartite system. I'm going to go into some details there. So first of all, we have a law today that provides for all Brazilian school food programs, okay? And you have some very specific issues that I bring to you here. So the first point is every school, every food nutrition offered in Brazilian schools needs to have an offer of appropriate healthy food in line with the culture, with the tradition, in line with healthy habits, and as per students' special needs. Also, we also link all this food to nutritional and food security. Another very important point that we have is social participation and sustainable development. So this food needs to be diverse, it needs to be produced locally, preferably by family farming, and also giving priority to traditional indigenous communities and Quilombo communities. Mariana is going to talk a little bit about this after me. So every sort of school food program needs to be in line with human rights, healthy, appropriate food, okay? So I'm going to explain our system a little bit. So we have public schools and we have private schools. So as I said, school food needs to follow those principles. However, we have the PNI, which is the National School Meals Program, which I'm going to detail a little bit better. But the PNI, the national program, only provides for public schools in Brazil. So every public school student in Brazil has access to food, meals through PNI. But in addition to meals through PNIs, we also have in 30% of these schools who have canteens where food is sold, okay, in public schools, and we have over 50% of these schools, food being sold in the surrounding areas of the school. So the PNI protects the child, offering appropriate, healthy food to every child in public school. But we have a whole interference of the food environment in the surrounding areas of the school, and also in relation to PNI, in other words, the environment in and outside of the school, that influences how our students feed themselves. And while this happens, private schools only has their school canteens, okay? And they need local regulations to ensure what is being offered. And I'm explaining this for me to try and explain how we get to it as a civil society. But now I'm going to talk a little bit more about PNI, okay? So just for you to have an idea, we have, well, 80% of the schools in Brazil, they're public schools. Okay, so PNI provides for 80% of our students, and 19% are private schools, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the program. So PNAE's goal is the growth and biopsychosocial development of the students, as well as learning, better school performance, and also the developing of healthy, sustainable eating habits. Okay, and this is for all public schools. And what is the path for us to be able to reach such a goal? Well, appropriate food. So I'm going to offer food that educates, and I'm going to educate people in eating. So again, food and nutritional education, okay? Which these are the 2 points that we work on. And in order for us to get to where we are, it's a long story, okay? This program has been around for 40 years already. It started with a more sort of human right to food and nutrition, with some help, some aid, and then we also have all the students from the public school. And then in this moment, we have a strong impact of industrialization. And then you're going to see the figures that we got on the next slide. And this is a big process, which we are trying to revert, actually. And then what we end up doing is we end up incorporating social participation effectively in 2009, going into a law that brings to this program a public policy structure based on human right to food and nutrition. As I said, this is an universal law. It is free of charge for all public school students, and it is important because we have a national contribution which is done, and the guideline happens at the national level, but we also have the contribution of states, of municipalities. Brazil has this sort of political division, national, state, and municipalities. Again, these 3 government levels, they contribute, they pay some fund, or should pay some fund, but the national government, the federal government, transfers resources, and then they follow up how these resources used. And this is a program that managed to get Brazil out of the hunger map, and during the pandemic supported the more vulnerable parts of the population very much. And it is very, very important to ensure food, to the underprivileged. And then, just for you to have an idea of figures, okay, we have over 5,000 municipalities in Brazil with 150,000 schools that are provided for by the program, 40 million students per day, 50 million meals a day. We have 80,000 managers involved in this, and 8,000 nutritionists that work in the program, okay? So next slide, please. Yeah, my time is running out, but just for you to understand, when we, as I said, school food was very much industrialized in order for us to reach this universal access. But then with the resolution from 2020, we have managed to bring back in natural food. So we have managed to, get rid of the processed foods, UPPs. We have managed to ban a certain variety of these UPPs, and we have ensured that a certain part of the budget be allocated for fresh and minimally processed food, 75% of the budget, also prioritizing fruit and vegetables, because a lot of the times we didn't have fruit in this because fruit's more expensive. And then it is important just to remember that this is for federal funds that are being transferred. Okay, next slide, please. And then I would invite you to have a look at this material that we've got where we explain an experience in Sao Paulo to implement fresh, minimally processed food being introduced. So we need, equipped kitchens within the school. So we need to purchase fresh and minimally processed products. We need a whole sort of supply management. And this is important because, managing this whole sort of a chain is very important. We also need to provide the cooks some training in order for them to be able to engage in this. The next slide, and I'll give the floor to Mariana, who is going to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face in order to ensure that the PNI remains.
I'm very happy to be here and to have the chance to share some of our experience and understanding about this very important policy. I'm going to try to speak English. If you have any trouble understanding, you can read. Everything is in the slides. So I'm here to speak to you about a very important dimension of PNAE. We call the National School Feeding Program PNAE. So every time I say PNAE, it means I'm mentioning the name of the program because it is very long. So this dimension of local and sustainable food system started mainly in 2009 with PNAE law, with a mechanism that stipulates that in law that a minimum of 30% of PNAE expenditure should be directed to acquisitions from family agriculture, which means small farmers with priority to indigenous, quilombola, and traditional people. PNAE budget, if we think in terms of dollars, annual budget, it's $1 billion. If we apply 30% to it, we're talking about $300 million, which complies a local market to family farmers. So it is a very important new market that has been created. And it's also opening another institutional procurement markets beyond the school meals also. So it is a very important policy to connect local food producers to consumers and also to democratize and decentralize public expenditure. As Georgia already mentioned, it started as humanitarian aid, and then we had a period where there was a very huge concentration on the buyings of food in the national level, and then with the National Constitution in '88, we started a process of decentralization, and then this public expenditure started to happen in the municipal level mainly. And that's very important to deconcentrate, as you will see. We have a maximum per year that can be bought from each familiar agriculture, which means that we are generating income to a large amount of family agricultures. So it is a program that creates a very strong synergy, increasing small farmers' income, local development to the promotion of in natura and minimally processed foods, in the same time that it is capable to face hunger and malnutrition. It's important to say that most of the children and adolescents that are in situations of undernutrition or food insecurity, they are in public schools. So this is the main form of access for them to healthy food. So we can pass next slide, please. So I think it's important to tell you about some previous conditions that we have in Brazil, because Brazil has a very strong family agriculture national policy that started in 1995. Actually, we have created a political category called family farmer that is defined by law. So a family farmer, just to have an idea, has to have a limited size land. Its enterprise has to be formed mainly with labor of the family. The family main income must come from agriculture activity, and it also includes extractive workers, small-scale fishermen, indigenous people, quilombola, and other traditional people. I don't know if you ever heard about this term, quilombola. It's a term we use for peoples from communities formed by runaway slaves in Brazil that settle in a determined territory that is recognized by the state. So we also consider them as originals people, and their special policies directed to them. So the familiar agriculture must have a sort of like a national certification, which is part of a national registration, which we understand as like the gateway to policies in Brazil. And we also have, like, as I was mentioning, the Family Agriculture National Policy. It provides subsidized credit, insurance, rural technical assistance. So all these conditions are very important to give the support so the family agricultures can access the public procurement. So next slide, please. One important thing also is that something that was very important, so to have this mechanism, is that we have a very strong social movement, peasant social movement, very connected to civil society organizations. And these demands were not only made by them, but are also sustained by them, because of course there's a lot of threats to this policy. So I'm gonna be quicker because we have a lot more to say. So how it works. Family farmers must be registered as family farmers at this national registration system. Municipalities, they do food procurement through local public calls at least once a year, based on local production availability, seasonal products, and menus created by nutritionists. Governments can only buy directly from farmers. There's no intermediaries. The price is based on an average price of local markets. There is a 30% extra payment for organic food, and the maximum annual sale for each farmer is $8,000. So we can have it very much spread in the whole country. Next slide, please. Next. Well, we have a very big challenge in making school feeding program work for indigenous and quilombolas.
She might come back in a minute. I think we can move to, if you could move a little bit, Niola, to slide, please keep moving forward, a little bit more and more. Perfect. So then Mariana can come back and finish her explanation on this connection to other policies. But I think Georgia can keep explaining about the subnational regulatory policies, and then we can come back to that point, if this is okay for you.
Ok. Eu vou... Então, depois a Mariana volta.
Okay, yeah, Mariana will come back a little bit to the program, because our idea was to talk a little bit about school food environments and our work as a food policy, as a food policy program working to regulate all the aspects of the sort of school environment. So as I talked about these environments, I mean, the private schools, they're not regulated as a public school environment are. And the idea is for us to regulate them regionally. And then the civil society organizations have worked so that regulation takes place and is done so effectively. So ever since we started working with this agenda, we first surveyed of what regulations we have for school food environments and their efficacy, because a lot of these regulations, they banned food, they didn't really address issues as far as advertising is concerned, and then only 6 regulations that we found in Brazil indeed met their goal of actually ensuring this healthy school food environment. So here, we also met with a group of experts and all our researchers, and also based on international materials. So we start trying to understand what does it mean to protect children and adolescents within the school food environment beyond the national program? And then we wanted a model in this scientific score, okay, this model that we are using, this scores for us to understand the level of effectiveness as far as the regulation is concerned, and it looks at 7 points. Okay, so first, the regulation of this restriction, as it were, this ban needs to be linked to food and nutritional education, and if it's not linked to this, it loses its sense and loses its strength when it's being implemented, okay? And it needs to talk about distribution as well as restriction, because we had a lot of regulation that restricted but did not promote access to healthy food. So we need these two aspects. So we need, the offer and the restriction in relation to products, of course. And it's important for us to have the whole scope of banning marketing within the schools, because, marketing was influencing the choices made by students. Another element that we use in this score is the way in which this regulatory measure is implemented, because a lot of these measures, they were published, however, they were not implemented. But then we try to look at measures that include public as well as private schools, because a lot of these measures focus on public schools and also the strength of the law, as it were, because in our experience, is that we end up having regulation within the executive branch, and then when the administration changes, that is just thrown out of the window. And if you haven't got a stronger law in order to support this action, you end up moving backwards. So the strength of this measure is very important. So it needs to be a law. And of course, we need to mention ultra processed food products specifically, okay? So based on this score, on these measures, is when we developed a model, okay? And the idea is to support the territory in the drafting of this bill, as it were. And here in 2022, we have a great achievement, which is when the Ministry of Education, through FNDE, which is the National Education Development Council, they published a technical note reinforcing the importance of territorial regulation that regulates food sold in schools in Brazil, and uses as a reference our model draft bill, okay? Which is what we've been working on in drafting. And here we have an important incidence in many different municipalities and states that we've been working for in this regulation. And I'm going to give the floor to Carol, who is going to talk about our two success stories, Niterói and Rio de Janeiro, where the draft bill has been approved. Hello, everyone. Good morning. First, thank you all for being here with us. And also, I'm going to try and speak not that fast. I feel more comfortable speaking in Portuguese also. So, Georgia talked a little bit about our actions in the locations where we work, and recently we had draft bills approved becoming a law in the municipality of Niterói, which is in the state of Rio de Janeiro, as well as in the city of Rio de Janeiro itself. We've had the bill approved, passed in the assembly. And then here I have a more sort of general sort of portrait, as it were, of how the actions work, because we talk about what the program is, the PNI, the need for local regulation, but in a ways, okay, how can we do this? What are the steps that we've been taking in relation to this? And I've brought this in a very wide-reaching manner, how these advocacy actions are organized. So in the first moment, we are mapping all of this in the legislative houses, parliamentarian sort of environments, trying to understand what the legislators are thinking about. I mean, and then of course this happens all at the same time. So we produce what we refer to as fact sheets, which are materials, technical materials with, well, It's basically technical information translated into a more pleasant way for reading. So not just society as well as the parliamentarians may have technical supporting information to be able to analyze the draft bills being brought forward. So we have scientific references and things like this, you know. And in this process, we have the sort of going one-on-one with the legislators to talk about this. So this means visiting their offices, scheduling meetings, with these people so that we talk to them about the legislation, presenting them with the data, reinforcing the importance of the actual regulation, of the actual law. And then a very important part of the component are the campaigns, having big awareness campaigns so that we can raise awareness not just of the legislators but also societies as a whole in relation to the importance of this law. And this has been the strategy that we have been using for reinforcing the local regulation, the local law. So here I have some figures, these images, just for you to see as far as how much these bills reach. So, for example, in Niterói, we have around 98,000 students. In Rio de Janeiro, this number is already 1.3 million students. Estimated population in Niterói is 516,000 people. In Rio de Janeiro, we're 6 million people. So this is, I mean, for you to have an idea, it is a very big city, right? And then the estimated population, which is 0 to 19 years of age, okay? Which is the population we intend on reaching with the bill. So 120,000 people in Niterói, and in Rio de Janeiro, 1.6 million. And the images at the bottom, these are campaign materials that we've used. So for Rio, so this is the first phase of the campaign that we started in 2021. And then these sort of more colorful materials, which is the campaign that we ran this year with T-shirts, so that would go for the voting day, wearing the T-shirts, with banners. This one in the middle is an example of a fact sheet. So we have data from a survey that we translate and show it like this, ultra processed food do this, they do that, and give you sort of information. And then the other one is the technical note, which is a sort of lengthier document, but that is the result of this whole sort of communication work so that it looks attractive. Next slide, please. So here we have some data in relation to the repercussion. This is a picture from the first voting session for the draft bill in Rio de Janeiro, the city, and it was voted in 2021. And then we have a fact sheet talking a little bit about how this popped up onto the media throughout time. So this slide addresses. So this slide shows a little bit how we've been very much present in public opinion. Okay, so in printed paper as well as so we've been present in. I'm sorry, guys. I keep getting messages here and then I get distracted. So be it on the printed media, be it like on TV media, so we have reached high repercussion rates as far as the approval of this law is concerned, approval of this bill. And these were the goals as far as the draft bills were concerned. So, so the moment that it became a law, there is a number of other issues that happen along the way, such as the interference of industry, particularly in the Rio de Janeiro project throughout this time from 2019. Since then, a lot of things have happened, but the final bill, the law itself, the final wording on the actual bill that was approved brings that it is ban the distribution and sale sugary drinks and ultra-processed food in public and private schools has been banned, and it keeps the display of ultra-processed food products in commercial establishments a position above children's line of sight on racks and shelves. So this is definitely an advancement. The previous goals were a little bit more wider reaching, but as time went by and the necessary negotiations, we had to leave a few things out. But we have prospects of having new sort of moments where this can incide also, and we can bring these other wishes that we've got for the next draft bills that we're gonna, fight for. So next slide. Now I give the floor to Marilia. Hello. So now I'm going to talk about the campaign, right? Yes. Very briefly, just to explain what this is all about, and then you can go into the next slide. Okay, then. So first, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, whoever is in another country. And this is a very important topic for us in the Bloomberg Partners. This is a topic that brings a lot of connection between the different institutions that we are. So we work very strongly sort of together. And this is an example of a partnership campaign, partnership action through this campaign, which was an interesting campaign with the highest sort of reach, which is eating well at school. And bringing the importance that school is an important space to protect children, to protect adolescents. And there is a space where food needs to be well addressed, as it were. So this is a campaign that we drew the attention to this cause, and this is like an umbrella campaign because it supports many actions that the four institutions have been working on. Next slide. And then here for me, and this is important for us to talk a little bit about the industry interference. We all know we have evidence, we have good examples for, public policy design, but always in this sort of game of chess that we play, we always have the industry as an opponent. And I'd like to bring some figures because we're talking about a country the size of a continent, okay, Brazil. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we've seen the size of the PNAE, the national program that basically provides 50 million daily meals to children and adolescents in school. And then on one side of the thing, we're talking about a sector which is agribusiness that corresponds to almost 25% of the country's GDP. We're talking trillions in profit. Okay, so you have a big market with a big sector. And this is why all food nutrition policies are the ones that have more interference from the productive sector. For you to have an idea, the agribusiness, they have a parliamentarian front made up of many parliamentarians, and this is the most successful, biggest, richest parliamentarian front. And then, of course, PNAE is an old policy that comes in a very founded policy. It's important for us to always look upon this with vigilant eyes. And for this, in order for us to expose our industry strategies and this strategic route that we've used throughout time, we developed a dossier called the Big Food Dossier that brings some specific cases for the policies. We are finishing its version in English, and we tell a PNAE case, of course. This is a portrait of the many different initiatives that we have within our parliament in order to change the program. And basically speaking, what we bring in this dossier was strong action from the dairy industry and the swine meat industry, having as their goal to create this market sort of reserve and facilitating the outflow of their production. At least this is the aim of their action, and thus they change important characteristics of the program, such as, it being compulsory to buy from family farmers. So a lot of our actions also in relation to the program is not just to enhance it, to ensure that the program's resources are always updated, kept, but it's very much keeping the vigilant eyes to ensure that we do not move backwards. And whoever actually knows the methodology used by Melissa Milong, you can see many of these strategies being used. But I mean, the associations, for example, okay, dairy and meat, we can see very strong influence. And this was a very strong case in the previous administration when we had the president as well as the minister of the agriculture. They were very much in line with agribusiness. So they had direct involvement with these sectors, and they had a very clear idea as far as outflowing their production. You see parliamentarians talking about this all the time, and we need to approach the debate that if you bring more milk, more, pork meat, that this would be important. And then just one last comment, the agribusiness sector in Brazil is so strong, right? That even if we have a change in administration, that we went from a pretty extreme right administration to a progressive administration. Now it's a very strong sector. They are one of the biggest influencers. They are always there, always present. We need to continue working, okay? And then, of course, this comes up a lot. This came up on textbooks, okay, which are books that we make available to the population, to children, that there was an initiative to review why, I mean, agribusiness was bringing reality of the use of, pesticides, deforestation, and we had a lot of movement to try and avoid this retrocess. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we always have a very well-known strategy of using, physical activity to try and change in focus. So these companies always have partnerships with schools, to promote physical activity. Next slide, please. And then we have some other classical examples. Also, we have, little souvenirs being dished out. They influence pedagogical material. They influence cultural activities. All of this is mapped out, and this is present in many cases that we see mapped out. So, in order to prevent against this, I'm going to talk about two initiatives in conclusion to my comments. So one is this document, okay, which is like a little primer. So because it's not everyone, it's not all public managers, people who live in school, the principal of the teachers, not everyone has a notion of the influence that the regulated sector has within the school, because a simple action of giving a souvenir, sponsoring like a play that is being put on, people don't really know how much this influences on your food choices. But this is material that brings, in a very practical way, talking about, how this is done and possible actions that you can take against this, okay? And then here, in conclusion, I bring one of the biggest advances that we've got, because there's no point just exposing, a systematized document all of these actions, but how can we prevent against industry interference? Because after the school community has been made aware, how do they indeed face this interference, So we saw good use of the tool developed by PAHO for you to prevent and manage conflicts of interest in country. Okay, in PAHO, in Brazil, they held a workshop within the big nutrition conference in the country. Last year, they held a workshop of public managers and people who work directly with the programs management, PNAE's management, and they did this sort of adherence test as far as this tool is concerned. And this is a tool which is more of a guide, really, in order for you to be able to make reflections and ask yourself, is that interaction important? Is it beneficial to the program? The person involved there, do they have a conflict of interest? So you have a tool, an instrument that guides you in relation to this decision. And we had some good news that a body within the Ministry of Education, which is a national educational development fund, they were able to release a technical note, and this technical note brings this guide of how you can mitigate, prevent against conflicts of interest here in food nutrition policies, and here specifically speaking in the case of Ben, I need to finish, but I need to give the floor back to Mariana. Vanessa, is that right? Yes, Marilia, perfect, please. Just to put everything in context, okay, everyone, for our audience here today, we had an initial presentation showing the structure that we've got as far as food, meals, food, sorry, school food, school meals in the country. So we have a difference between public and private schools, particularly in relation to regulation, because only public schools are covered by the national school meals program at PNI. So Georgia talked a little bit about the figures, and Mariana was talking a little bit about the interface it has with other public policies, particularly those that ensure that small farmers, family farmers can offer their local produce to this market. And there is an initiative within the country called the School Food Observatory that we'd like to talk a little bit about. So Marianne is going to go back very quickly to talk about this national observatory. And then thank you, Vanessa. I'm sorry, everyone. My internet dropped down. I'm not even going to open my camera, okay? But I'm going to be quick, really. But the idea is to basically say that the School Food Observatory's coalition of social movement and many of the organizations that are in attendance here today take part in this observatory was created in 2020 with the goal of widening the narratives, the voices of people, who are subject of the program, particularly students, family, farmers, members of the school food councils, and also to create a wide-reaching network for defending the PNI above all within the National Congress. As you know, my colleague mentioned, there is a lot of interference from the industry to create, market reservation areas such as, the dairy product, meat. We also have a campaign to increase the per capita amounts of the PNI, which were very much outdated after the years where everything was disassembled with the Bolsonaro administration. And we had a very important achievement last year, which is an increase in 34% in PNI's national budget, which is the result of our advocacy work in the National Congress. And we keep an online sort of list of publications, our ideas for us to be a space of reference for study as far as this program is concerned within a law sort of perspective. And every year we publish a study with our analysis in relation to the program. Okay, this is our big network to defend the PNI, advocate for PNI. We also take part in social participation spaces such as the National School Food Council, also PNI's consulting group, which has recently been created within the scope of the National Food Program Managing Committee. So this is what I wanted to share. And I'd also recommend that you watch these little mini docs that we made in Brazil, which talks a little bit about the school meals program vis-a-vis indigenous people. In other words, the challenge of ensuring that this program is also a reality in Quilombola and also indigenous communities. Thank you very much. Thank you all, our panelists. And now we are going to have a brief session for questions and answers. We have some questions already, so I'm going to take a block of issues and then I'll ask our panel members to talk a little bit about the questions. So the first is, can we talk a little bit about what are the entities, the public entities involved in implementing the PNI and the role that they perform? And now I am also going to address some other issues in relation to PNI, particularly in relation to implementing Resolution 6, okay, which restricts the offer of UPPs whether or not there is an assessment, whether or not this regulation is being kept in the country. And the main challenge is vis-a-vis its implementation. So if we could comment on this in 5 minutes, and then we'll go into another block of questions. Okay, hi, Van. Yes, I can talk a little bit about this. I couldn't detail it much, but PNAE is implemented fully by the government, okay? It's all public, it's a tripartite system. So the national government provides the guidelines, they transfer a significant amount for, you know, the resources to be used. And then the state governments, they perform this because there are some schools which are state schools, okay? So they do PNAE in their schools and they can or not support their municipalities. And then the municipalities, they also run the PNAE in their municipal schools. So a program is operationalized by the states and municipalities, and the federal government transfers funds and provides monitoring guidelines, follows up, you know, does overseen in order to ensure its implementation in relation to the challenges of Resolution 6. I really didn't have a lot of time to address. We have a first point, which is you working with a product with a shorter expiry date. So it's much simpler for you to have, you know, UPP, which, you know, has 18 months expiration day instead of dealing with fresh products that will last for a week, maybe two. So we have this whole sort of logistic management as far as the food's concerned. And we also have some other challenges because some schools don't have structure for cooking, because for you to take fresh food into the schools, you need to cook it. So you need to equip the school for that. You need to have the infrastructure in the kitchen, and you also need to have cooks involved in this work. So these are the big challenges, you know. And then the government also has financing lines for structuring the schools, as well as incentives for training these cooks. So this is sort of the path for implementing Resolution 6. If anyone wants to add anything to what I've said, thank you. Yes, I can add a little bit. When we talk about management, it's important to mention that at the scope of the state, of the municipality, the policy is operated by the Secretariats of Education. However, the policy has an intersector sort of quality because of the local purchase, which is done. There is a lot of sort of intersector work done by with the Secretariats of Agriculture, the sort of technical bodies who provide the farmers support, and also with the secretariats in charge of public procurement. So this is a work that carries quite a certain level of intersector quality, and we have many different management models. So we have the centralized management, which is the town hall that procures everything centrally and distributes the food to the schools. But we also have a model where we have decentralized management. So the town hall gets the funds from the federal government, adds their own funds to it. They transfer it to a school sort of cashier, if you will, and it is the school principal that procures the products locally. These are some of the possibilities given within the PNAE law in relation to UPPs. What we hear a lot is that we have a legislation which is more advanced than the capacity for it to indeed be enforced. In addition to the other aspects mentioned by Georgia, we saw in a study recently listening to, you know, the council, school food council members, that there is a lack of political will from the managers. So a lot of these companies that provide services to states, products to states, they support the candidacy of, you know, the politicians. So you have this whole sort of strong political links, as it were, and it's difficult to break away from this. And there's also resistance from the school community because it is more work, you know, for the work cooks, and a lot of the times the family themselves, as we saw in the case of indigenous communities, you know, the family, they have the expectation for the children to have access to the food that children in the city eat, as it were. So there is also a wish for these UPPs also on behalf of the schools, of the students. And this is why it is important for us to, run campaigns such as the one that Marilia has actually presented, that we are doing collectively in relation to healthy food in schools. Perfect, thank you. So in sort of parallel, as it were, we have this structure within the public schools, which are regulated by P9, but we also have interference trying to go into this market, to ensure that specific products are included in this law. We have this whole sort of school surrounding areas, and we have this whole complexity, which is to include, enforce a program such as this in a country the size of Brazil. And at the same time, we have private schools that represent around 20% as presented here. 20% of the schools within the national territory, and we would like to understand a little bit more if whether debates in relation to local regulation, whether or not they also include the surrounding areas of schools uh, for private schools or just public schools. If you have some more information in relation to studies of the school food environment in Brazil, if we have managed to gauge the effects of the law in areas where this has been passed. And also the question from our audience is, how is private school food? Is it better? Is it worse than public schools? If you could talk a little bit about these points also, we would be very grateful.
Eu vou falar um pouquinho, não sei se a
Yeah,
câmera
Van, I'm going to talk a little bit and then maybe, I'm sorry. I've turned off my camera because my connection is not really that great, but I think in relation to these points, what we can do is we can mention the study for, the trading, selling of food items in Brazilian schools. And these studies have been done by many different universities in Brazil, and they've been doing this work to specifically look at the food environments in private schools. And what we have been seeing is that this environment is actually pretty bad, and it is not, it does not favor healthy choices, generally speaking. This is kind of the current sort of panorama that we've got, and this is very important data for us to be able to kind of base our actions through, particularly within the location. This survey has been done in many different cities, capital cities. So it's been done in Rio de Janeiro, also in the city of Niterói, and they're still being done in many other capital cities in Brazil, such as Belo Horizonte, Porto Alegre, Recife, all big cities in the country. So we're talking about a whole range of capital cities, and we have this whole sort of general panorama that private schools do not have a very good food environment, because in addition to the offer of UPPs, they have marketing being exposed, which is being also addressed. So we have this issue. I mean, there are things that, sometimes doesn't look like marketing, but ends up being, such as a poster with food. So the surveys have been pointing this out. So this is what we've got. What was the other question? No, I think you covered it, Carol. It was basically comparing between the quality of food in public schools and comparing it with private schools. Of course, we are now reaching our last minute as far as our webinar is concerned. I know that there's a lot of information in relation to, Brazil school food structure. This recording for today's webinar is going to be available to you in English, in Portuguese, in Spanish. And if you want to go back to the presentation, if you have any specific questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Okay, all organizations that have been working with this theme in Brazil, this is a common theme of the organizations which are part of the Food Policy Program Brazil. And we are also available to help you in debates, in conversations, chats. And it is important to remember that we are going to have some new webinars on, the topic of schools. We're going to have some other schools who can bring more experience and do this in a sort of more fluid manner. We would like to thank our panel members for their attendance. Thank you, Mariana, Cara, Georgia, and Morelia. Also thanking all of you in attendance here today, and we hope that you have learned a little bit more about our system, which is very complex, but also inspires other places too, and it's very beautiful. So wishing everyone a great rest of the day, and thank you all very much for being here today.